Alright, time to get into this.
Better late than never, I guess. Alright, it's time to review Loki. Let's go. That's the intro. That's all I need. Okay, this has been out long enough where I can go into spoilers, right? I think so. So, yeah, if you haven't finished Loki Season 1, click off now. Good? Good. Kang's in this. If that's a spoiler, you should have already clicked off. Alright, I'm just gonna be honest. Out of all the live action MCU Disney Plus shows we've gotten trailers for, I was probably looking forward to this the least. It felt a bit too late to make a project about Loki, considering he died. And making it about the version of Loki who escaped in Avengers Endgame seemed like another weird choice. And I wasn't really too impressed by the trailers. It looked very derivative of shows like Doctor Who and yeah, just basically Doctor Who. But, as it turned out, Loki is definitely my favourite MCU show so far. Not counting Daredevil. I mean, it's probably not canon anyway. But Loki ended up being a lot more interesting and creative than I expected. The first episode really took me off guard by how good it was, and also how it explored Loki's character, which is another good thing about the show. Because it's 6 hours long, it's able to explore the characters in depth in a way that the movies really can't, and I think that's what really makes the show work as well as it does. So, let's discuss the characters. First up, Loki. I did not expect this show to delve into Loki's psyche as much as it did, especially in that first episode. Tom Hiddleston's performance also helps elevate that, especially in the scenes where Loki feels weak and helpless. This might sound weird, but out of all the MCU shows so far, this does the best job justifying its existence. Not just because it has the most impact on the MCU as a whole, but also because making a show about Loki, a Loki who hasn't and can never experience things we see him go through in the movies, is very interesting. He hasn't gone through his redemptive arc yet, and until the last few episodes, he's essentially a villain who's just playing along so he can overthrow the TVA. It's just a very interesting direction to take this character that ultimately paid off. Owen Wilson as Mobius was an absolute delight. Loved the back and forth dynamic he had with Loki. You get a lot of scenes where it's just these two talking, just kind of vibing, chatting it up. And it's some of the most entertaining stuff in the show. Sylvie is an interesting character. As someone who is kind of familiar with Loki in the comics, I know that the character just sometimes changes into a female form just whenever. Point is, Lady Loki is not a separate character. She's just Loki. So, I'm just going to speculate here and guess they just combine the characters of Loki as a woman and Enchantress, but never called her Enchantress because they didn't want audiences to be confused or accuse them of ripping off DC's Enchantress. They also couldn't call her Loki because obviously that would be very confusing. So she's just Sylvie, which is Enchantress's name in the comics. This isn't really a critique or anything, I like to speculate about and review shows behind the scenes process because it's fun. I don't know. But, Loki's in love with her. I mean, it's technically not weird, right? Unless they share the same DNA, which I think maybe they do. I don't know. I hope not. Anyway, it's still kind of weird. However, what I did like about their romance was that Sylvie didn't really like Loki back, or at least wanted to conceal that. I know a lot of people, even if they don't think it's weird, say that they don't have good chemistry, but I think that's kind of the point. Sylvie just sees Loki's infatuation with her as some roadblock in this quest to destroy the TVA, and I think that's shown really well in the final episode where she kisses Loki, but it's just so she can get rid of him so she can complete her goal. It's honestly a great subversion of the usual love interest trope in superhero movies. Judge Renslayer worked well as the show's antagonist. The show keeps you intrigued in her backstory and her motives, and again, it's not where I expected they would go with this character. She isn't evil, and she just has to keep trying to justify it. Because that's really all she is. She has no other purpose in life. And I'm interested in where they take her character in Season 2. All the more minor characters, Hunter B-15, Miss Minutes, the variant Lokis, they were all well used for the limited screen time they had. but by far the most impactful minor character was Kang, or the one who remains, played by Jonathan Majors. After watching the episode, I was really surprised to find out that a lot of people seem to be a bit split on his performance in this. Personally, I thought it was fantastic, because yes, he's cheering up the scenery, having fun with it, but you also just know this man is really tired. He's not thinking straight, and not just because he's crazy for no reason, but because he is absolutely exhausted and he is at the tipping point. He is just worn out for being alive for, I guess, infinite time. Like when he gets on his desk, for example, most characters like this would jump on there really fast, but he just awkwardly gets on 1 foot at a time. Like he is an old man, it essentially hurts his joints just to do something like that. I love those mannerisms in his performance that just subtly bring so much to the character, that you otherwise don't really think about. Some other things I like in the show include the music. It felt very retro and unique, not just for the MCU, but for any movie or show now. A lot of the settings are fun and interesting, like the TVA headquarters, which had a 1960s sci-fi aesthetic, sort of Jetsons inspired. The cyberpunk future, the weird purple planet, which wasn't populated by humans. I mean, it's in the future, but I don't know, are they meant to be aliens? Whatever. And then there was The End of Time, which felt like it was out of a post-apocalyptic 1980s B-movie. The whole episode in that place reminded me of the film Turbo Kid, which is a fun 1980s throwback movie. And then Kang's Castle with all the golden cracks, it looked stunning. Also, the last episode, great cliffhanger. The show already went in a lot of unexpected directions, but even after everything it pulled, this ending still surprised me. I mean, with the multiverse being opened, and evil Kang taking over the TVA presumably, and that really heartbreaking reveal that Mobius and Loki's friendship had been undone, it just created this sense of dread that I hadn't felt before by any MCU property. Not even by Infinity War's cliffhanger, to be honest. I think part of that, though, was because I didn't think there was going to be a season 2, let alone a cliffhanger. So, not knowing that probably helped. As for the negatives, the biggest problem with this show is the action. It's not incomprehensibly bad or anything, but the action scenes are all very choppy. There's a lot of quick cuts, the choreography really isn't that great, and they just lack any creativity or style. To be fair though, this show isn't about the action scenes. Kinda like Batman Begins in that way, where the action really isn't all that great, but it's not the main focus. It's more about the story and the dialogue and progression of the characters. But unlike Batman Begins, a lot of the time in this, it does feel like they're just putting action scenes in the show for the sake of having an action scene, even if it really isn't all that necessary. Aside from the final fight between Loki and Sylvie, whenever there is an action scene, I'm not invested in it. I also don't love the look of the show sometimes. There's some not great green screen, especially throughout episode 3 and 5. It just looks real bad. Why aren't they using the volume? I thought they fixed this issue. And a lot of it looked really dark and dusty. I know it was an intentional choice, but it just felt kind of distracting. It reminded me a lot of Solo, a Star Wars story at points. I think maybe one of the set designers over at Disney has a smoking problem. I don't know. Overall, Loki was definitely the best thing we've seen from the MCU, I'd say at least since Endgame. The writing and performances really stand out. This is some of the best character work in the MCU, and overall, the show is just really entertaining and fun. I'm giving Loki an 8.5 out of 10. And here's where I'd rank it with all the other MCU movies and shows. Anyway, that's what I thought about Loki. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter at CinemaGeekYT, leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Bruh.